Hey guys, I'm back with another one. This is Isaiah Salmonte Gregorio. I do have a middle name, but I don't usually say it. So it's Isaiah Emilio Almonte Gregorio. So that's usually they gave me that was my grandfather's last name, first name from my father's side. So they gave it to me, kid. Um, so we're back with another one. Uh, I left off with some pointers, some pointers from when I was a kid and stuff like that, and getting into my grandfather's when he was a commander in the Dominican Army. He was a general. I think he was a general. He was the general. So when I was a kid, I remember we have some pictures of him coming into New York, where I used to stay at, and to what he was considered like an African king, and he was one of the first Dominicans to ever come to New York. And I think the first thing that he attended was my mother's wedding, which was in New York, which was when she married my father. Which I think was in the 80s or in the 90s. I'm not too sure. I should ask. Yeah, so he was the first Dominican here to cross as an army sergeant, as a commander to come. So he was considered. He was huge. He was recognized by many people, by the president of the United States and a couple other people. So it was huge. It was something that um, was like the first step to becoming like this um, to becoming like the first step in human history to do something like that. So it was huge. He got to make it out hugely, and got recognized by by a lot of people, by Africa, by the United States, by Dominican Republic. So his name was Thomas Gregorio, which is my last name too as well. And ever since then, it's been a changing moment. Some of the stuff that he would go out to go do. We have a couple pictures here with him. He'll come when I was a kid. He'll even come down a couple times to just check, to just hang out with us for the summer, while I was in school, and he'll stay with me in my house. He'll stay in my room. He was also a diabetic, so he would have to go to the hospital too to get checked out and get like tested and stuff, and make sure that everything was okay. It used to mix sometimes with my Legos, which I thought was pretty funny. Sometimes I would think some of his needles and stuff were some of the Lego pieces, and sometimes I would get confused. There was this one time where I opened one up and they like ticked me, and I had to go wash my hands like at that very second, like because it could be like cross contamination. So that was like some of the steps that some of the times where he would come over and stuff like that. He also explained to me some of the stuff that was going on in Dominican Republic while he was here, and when I was like in third grade. And in third grade, I was that's when Barack Obama became the first black president of the United States. And my grandfather knew Barack Obama, and he did get to work with them a few couple times up until leading to later when he passed away. Um, where was I? He um, he came a few couple of times, and he explained to me what was going on in the Dominican Republic and when he fought in the Cuba Revolution, which was Dominican Republic versus Cuba, and that was World War II, when it was like with Hitler, Nazi Germany, the assassination of the prince, um, uh, Japan, the nuke that hit Japan, Pearl Harbor. Um, so it was like he explained it to me. He told me he was still young around that time, and there was like a lot of dictatorship um, going on. And at that time there was no like freedom. And there's a movie actually called Red Tails, if I'm not mistaken, and it's about how the first black uh, unit got to fight in World War II. Um, it's a very good movie. You guys should go watch it. But it's about how the boys got to fight out in the war and achieve like great masses of success while at the war, and this becoming the first black army or corps that got to, and they were these were actually black airplane fighters. What is it called? Airplane. Um, uh, okay, but they were the first black. So I would like to first say that out, because it was very important that during this time there was a lot of anti. There was a lot of racism. There was the world was still like small minded. We weren't up to the level that we are in today's world, where we're seeing huge masses of steps of like across the board, across who people who have come up and done spectacular stuff for us in our everyday society. And what came at the cost, and all the first that we had. So that was what my grandfather's, during the time when he was growing up, or when he was already an army sergeant, or the age that what he was going through. And I remember him telling me there was this Cuban kid that, which is a little off story, but there was this Cuban kid that he was a sniper, and he would never miss. Like, he would always hit the head, like around like this corner of the head, and he would never miss. Eventually, the country of Cuba did lose the Revolutionary War, and they did have to go down because they were communists. And at the time, the world was for democracy, and at the time, what what the world was leaning towards, which is a little crazy now, because now we're going through like some back in time. I don't know if you've seen the news about Cuba and what's going on now, and how they come to a rise now. So my granddad did win the war. He made it out. He later became a commander. But prior to that, there was this guy named Trujillo. I don't know if you guys are familiar with that. Where he did take over the island, and once they won, you know, it was guaranteed, liberty for the Dominican Republic, for one of the Caribbean islands. And during uh, the final stage, there came a dictatorship, and he immediately took over. So it would end it short, and uh, they had to end, the what was to come for the Dominican Republic, and say that, saying where the blacks and the natives had stand for the in the World War II. And around that time, there was before the war started, uh, um, was the imperialism, which imperialism was which I'm kind of fascinated how when they come up with like certain words that would describe like what were they going to call like the motive as to what they were doing, and as to why. And the imperialism basically took over the which was FDR, if I'm not mistaken, or FDR, and took over the Caribbean islands in that aspect. So during that time, it was pretty hectic, for the young men and for the young women who did stand up during the war. Later on, my grandfather did become a commander or general of the Dominican Republic, and he did stand for several years as the leading officer of Dominican Republic. So that was huge, back to when my mom and my uncles used to go through. Got to go see him in moments like these. So that was like a huge step for us in the Dominican Republic, for Black people, and for everybody else across the board. Um, so he was huge. He had thoughts of becoming the president of the Dominican Republic. He had um, ideas of that did benefit the Dominican party, and how did he influence many different places in Dominican Republic, and how far did that go? It was huge. Dominican Republic is only like 3 hours of length away from each other, so it's not that big of an island. And if you were to count Haiti, it would only go up to 5 hours, maybe possibly 4, 5 hours, 6 hours, maybe. So it's not that big compared to bigger. We live in the United States, so the United States is like, coming from, if you came from Florida to like New York, say for example, that's like 20 something hours. So it's almost like triple or quadruple the length of Santo Domingo or Dominican Republic. So that was something to consider. And that was during the time. I don't know if you remember earlier during the time when Haiti used to have earthquakes, and what tragedies were there around that time too, and what were to bring about, how were they resolving for all these second world calamities, or the natural disasters, or everything that was going on at the time that we didn't have There's certain things that some other countries or first world countries have. So it was hard living in Dominican Republic, especially if you go down to Dominican Republic and you see like the difference between the tools that we have and the tools that they have. Necessity of like, growing up or having hard work, labor. So it's like little stuff like that that we got to keep in mind that not everybody has, not everybody you know grew up with, or you know or even understands those stuff. So it's always good to keep that in mind and donate. I know some people who donate. My mom used to donate to like a child's it's like a children's um, place where they may be orphaned or don't have the stuff, and which you usually normally see in Africa too as well. And it's huge. Like I've seen a lot. Hopefully one day I could be that be there too. Um, in later years, it was always good. I got to go to Dominican Republic and climb, mango trees. I'd climb my grandfather's tree. He used to have like a house like very far away from the capital, and we used to go over there. I used to sit down and watch him. He had a bird. He had a few dogs, a few animals out in the garage in his house. And my grandfather was always into meditating and meditating and the political system, and some of the things that come with it. So he was really into that. I used to watch him do it. I used to stay with him. He used to come to New York, like I said, when I was like very young, and he used to stay over. We do have some pictures. I have some pictures up on Facebook. I have some pictures in my old some old stuff that I have. Um, so yeah, it's I do remember him almost coming to live over here, which was huge when he was coming to live down here. It was like enormous, like that right there with him just thinking about coming to live down in the United States was like a huge step inside the United States, and the people who were aware of that, you know, um, I wouldn't say that they got to benefit, but I would say that they did get to like see it happen at first sight. Like this was what the world was coming to. Like this was like huge. Like a World War II veteran from the Lesser Antilles was coming to the United States of America to come live, and that influence and that impact was just like around the area was just huge. You know what I mean? It was just something that at the time nobody could like compare to it. Nobody, like there was nothing, nobody else like can compare to it. There was just at this time, and still to this day, there's like nobody. You have to go to war to have something like that happen. You have to like dedicate something. Like it was just big as like saying like it was like Mother Teresa coming in. You know, um, people like that coming into the United States and coming to like live and settle and do stuff. My grandfather used to speak to some people that it did influence, and that he would share this influence and share this kind of intellect with other people, and becoming like the man that he was at the time, and becoming that level of status was like like again I would say was huge in comparison to to what we were dealing with before, especially with the Barack Obama administration that did do some stuff too, but but not in comparison to my grandfather. So it was like a huge um event that was happening, and back in 2014, 13, 2012, something like that. Um, it was getting crazy. Like there was a lot of stuff happening back in when I was in sixth grade. I remember I was used to be like you could just be so aware of some people that are around you and not know um so there was a lot of gifts, there was a lot of signing going on, and when somebody presents themselves with something like that of that level, you always want to know that that you are going to influence a lot of people, and uh, we did influence a lot of people. A lot of people came to celebrate and give gifts to me too, in remembrance to my grandfather and what he did for the world. And it was becoming the first black to ever come to do a lot of stuff. I'm not even so aware as to how far. Like I'm still asking questions. I'm still getting to know some of the stuff that he was even involved with, that to this day I'm still finding out. And the more that I talk to people, the more that I find out more and more information about what did he do, and what kind of stuff did he put out or set out to the people. So back in 2012, 2013, there was an incident that happened that I don't know how to explain it. But there was a lot of I don't know if at this point you just call it spirituality, or like spiritual warfare, or there's like a word for it, but that's not that I just can't get to right now. But I'm gonna just say that it was just spiritual warfare. And how can we go from talking about uh, certain things and calling it or having the proper vocabulary for it. So for now, I'm gonna just say it was like spiritual warfare. There was a lot of spiritual warfare going on, and I wanted to really understand what was going on, but I couldn't. And it went left, and then it called my grandfather to the Dominican Republic. And I don't know who it was or what triggered it, but they ended up assassinating my grandfather. Yeah. Let's take a second to let that sink in, that that stuff is like real. Like to have somebody killed, or spiritually inseminate them with like a disease, or like with something that's unknown, or something you just make up right there, because it was unknown. Like nobody knows what it was or what it does. I remember telling my mom that I was like, you gotta believe. I remember I used to score so many nice points, so many things that like inspired people. And I used to say like, Mom, and I was young, I was like a little kid. I was like, you have to believe that, if you believe this, then you would not know, or you would not, it would not be possible for it to like happen and stuff like that. And I was basically talking about how, like just putting your mind towards it, towards like that he was gonna like he was sick at the time, would have put a worse position in letting 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 him fall into a worse in the predicament. So there was he ended up passing. There was another story that there was what is that called? Not a monk. It's not called a monk. It's called like a nomad, a nomad. But there nomads who would come from the church, and I don't know if you're familiar with them, but they walk. They're like Jehovah Witnesses and stuff like that. Whatever. They were Jehovah Witnesses that would come to see him, and they were like spiritually aware. Like you didn't even have to call them; like they would show up. That's how like crazy it was. Like that's how real it was. That's how real I was trying. I wanted to be, so that it could be a little bit more easier for me when I'm clinging on to. But who knows? This could be old because I missed out on a few couple things when I was a kid too. Like I know there's like some like certain things that you could do like spiritually, like that was happening like in the metaphysical that you just can't do in like real life. Like at least the life that you could say that was like physical or 3D or third dimensional. So with that being said, there were some people that came to visit him, and you know and he fought for as long as he could. But it was strong. He was old already. He was already in his 70s, in his mid 70s, and there was just so much that we could do at the time. So he was assassinated, and I'm gonna let that like sink in for a little bit. That he was assassinated. Who knows who it was? Who knows uh, why? Who knows uh, what was the reason and stuff like that? But that was what was going on at the time, and that was so hard for me. I remember we went to the hospital, and he passed in New York City. I don't know where in New York City, if it was like but we had this going on in New York City, which was huge. Like it was huge. Like everything that was happening in the hospitals, and he would score just such a high grade in the hospital. Like it was so high grade. It was so contained so much like percentage of percentage that it was just like this was huge. He was scoring like grades that at the time it was hard um, for the average man to like just go in and just achieve. Like no, this was like this was rare. So I just wanted to make that like known and possible as to how this was achieved, and what did my grandfather like get into that made him into the man that he was, or the man with that much power at the time. So he passed back in 2013, 2014. I know it was around November, and we had a funeral for him in New York too. Back in Monroe, I think it was in Monroe, around there, Monroe Avenue. I don't know where in Monroe, but there was like a funeral home in Monroe. It was huge, dude. It was huge. And the only thing I could describe it was just like it was just big. It was there were, and then I remember later on they shipped him to the Dominican Republic. I couldn't even go up to like watch him or touch him or anything. I was just like so stunned about what was happening. I couldn't like reconcile or put into like pieces that my grandfather had passed away, and like that this was going, what was going on, and whatever, and how did this go into effect. um I do have some uncles that were inside the army too at the time, so I don't know what to say about that, but we took him to Dominican Republic, and that's when they had like the soldiers leaving, when like the soldiers goodbyes, when they shoot the gun in the air. That was when I realized, like, damn, he's gone, like this is real. I started crying. My mom had been like, was out of it and stuff like that. She didn't know. And at the same time, we had an uncle. I had an uncle in Dominican and Puerto Rico that as well, you know, which spiritually, I don't know how to explain this, but had died too, and I guess they wanted to like bury the power because the power was so immense, it was so grand, it was so powerful that it had held back a lot of people and Dominican Republic, and black people at the time were powerful. They were mighty. Every time I say Mighty Milers, I don't know if you guys are familiar with Mighty Milers. I always think of like Jamaica or something. I always thought it was like a Jamaican who like came up with it. My mind or something, you know what I mean? Like could have been in the description of what that word is now today. So my uncle as well passed, and I don't know if that was a part of like the scene to also, which was a army sergeant as well, and he served in Puerto Rico Army for about like 50 years, for a long time. He was very old too, and he died too as well a couple days later. And it was very sad. It was my cousin. I remember she was going through it. Her family was going through it. And it was just so sad to see, like, at the time, seeing somebody so big and so grand go down like that, and especially somebody who was more than just a grandfather. He was like came to support you at like, even as like as a leader, as a father. So as a friend. So it was like very hard for people to like deal with the fact that he had passed, or they had passed, or my grandfather passed, and then my uncle passed, which was like it was just a very sad moment for me. To this day, I still think about it, and I'm just there. And it's like, why did both of them have to go? That was one of my biggest questions. Why did both of them have to go at the same time? Why couldn't it, like, not that but why did both of them have to leave? Which I want to ask that to them, and want to know why and what triggered that, what triggered such a loss that big. What was what was behind all that? And my grandfather was like, he wasn't old. I'm not gonna say he was old, but he was out of well age, mighty. he was still strong. He was still able. Um, but later on, my uncle did pass with him, and it was like a sign like that he had lost his Puerto Rican power too. His Puerto Rican brother, his Puerto Rican friend. That the two of them just went together. And as a kid, I used to grow up. Now that I think about it, thinking that they were both the same thing, or both like it was a duo to have both of them, you know, in the same sentence. Especially when I was a kid, it was a little bit more tighter than what I feel like it's now. That you could say the whole thing and just be like Dominican Puerto Rico or Puerto Rico Dominican, and not feel like you're missing out. During World War II, there was this thing going around, and it was as if like who was communist, and it was like a commun, and they even had trials in the United States of who was a communist and who was because it was illegal. It was bad. It was like horrible to become a communist in the United States. It was like, you could go to jail. It was like turning your back on all the propaganda, all the sayings and stuff like that people would do or say, act upon. It was just huge. I could imagine there was some commercials out there of if you watch the Captain America movie too, like the Captain America movie does a great explanation as to like how would they have felt against Nazi Germany, communist Germany, and who was their leader. So that suspicion had grown part or fasted fast in the Caribbean island, where there was like it could have been Cuba, it could have been Puerto Rico, it could have been who knows, Jamaica, who was next to be communist, and what it had meant to be communist. And for me, from what I could gather from the small steps of being communism was communism is just a communal way of leading the country, and it could be done by a dictator, it could be done by tyranny, and for that very reason, it was very like scary to be a communist, because that belief was threatening to the power of what we had here in the United States, and which was in good lead, the power that was divided in the United States back in Independence Day, in the Declaration of Independence, and in the Articles of Articles of Confederation. I'm sorry, I can't pronounce the word right now. Confederation. Okay. And what was being said inside of these things. So that was huge to take into consideration as to why we don't, and for many reasons more why we didn't consider why communism was, and the fight was mostly was was politics. It was just like what politics or what leadership could bring the best, not just the best, but could bring the world. And that was the dividing of NATO, the beginning of NATO, um, et cetera, et cetera, and how did the United States even get involved with a war that was all the way in Europe? So that was one of the main reasons as to why Puerto Rico was like such a dire power at the time, was to put the dog down and like sit him down. Sit him down. So we wanted to have that position in Puerto Rico so that they won't go astray to go astray. So we wouldn't want them to go out and become communists or join the party and whether become another world war and have a divide in the Caribbean islands there too. And now Cuba's left in a position where it doesn't have the same opportunities that some Caribbeans, may have. And that hurt them during the Fidel Castro's administration because, now in in the 2000s where there was like such a huge pushing of cellular devices and what what do we use it for and why, but not only as far as that, but where where does this come into play in the United States, and how does it help like millions and millions of people get their words out, against certain problems that we are having in the United States. So that was why my grandfather had that was why my grandfather had this idea, of having a that in place. So, or why it was dire at the time to have, but that's why it was so important, and why they could have just unleashed the power. And I'm not saying like for any other position, but it could have just been just to mess with this certain power that had been in power for more than 50 years. So it was just like, it just ended. There was nothing that anybody could have said or could have done or wanted to have done in that perspective. I don't know. It was just so sad in just a moment where I couldn't come to terms. I was young. I didn't know. I didn't know any better. I was still young. I didn't know too much about. There's just so many things you could grab your hands on. As a kid, even the phones weren't like. You probably could have searched up something to, like what was what. But at the time, it was just not as popular as it is like like later on where the 2020 and 2019 where you could do so many stuff with your phone. So that was more so what was going on. In later years, how I lived without my grandfather was hard, especially for my mom. I'm not gonna say it was like hard, but emotionally hard. You know, we didn't have that. He was like so much. Um, he had just so much in the family that it was just hard to like get over the fact. You know, to this day we still celebrate. You know, the day that he passed, and we remember him. The various we go to church, we go to different stuff so we could remember him and go about it as we need to. And of course, in remembering who he was and what he set out to be. I try to follow in his footsteps. It's not. It's a little hard. And I was diagnosed. I wasn't diagnosed, but I tried to join the army later on in my life, like around the age of like 21, 22, 23. And reports came back that I had like a psychosis, which I never like knew of, and I did get denied into the army. And for that just psychosis stuff, it's hard to like even get rid of it because you can't possess a gun license or anything. You can't you can't do a few couple things. You know, you gotta get watched by you have to get checked by the hospital. You have to do a few couple things for that. So it was really hard to I'm not gonna say it was hard, but who knows how did I get like again, this is a very spiritual world. So as far as spirituality goes, as far as the spiritual warfare goes, we can only know as how far can you go to reach grounds that do bring you exactly what you ask for or what you need in terms of like just physically just going to get it or something. Which I could have said that I was probably a target because of who my grandfather was. But I would have needed to know a little further information before getting into that. And that was one of the main reasons why I'm getting on YouTube now, was to let my words get there. Let's try to find a way to there before getting, into like before time just takes over, and which is like why is it so conceptual? Why isn't it so like whenever you need it, you could just grab it? Which is a little not considering the fact that when you need to do it, you need to do it now, so that you won't be wasting any time or anything. But at the same time, I feel like there should be some kind of mediation between, when are you ready to go get it, and when can you see the opportunity to go get it? Because it can't just be that you do it now and then there's no opportunity to go get it. So that was huge. I was like huge on that, and how was I gonna get it? How was I gonna get there? You know, and some people who resemble my my position right now is, I don't know if you're familiar with RFK, who is Father John F. Kennedy, which is kind of funny because I went to the campus, John F. Kennedy campus in the Bronx, Charter School for Humanities, which I did mention in the last video. And what did it take to and you know, as far as that, what did it take to get there? So I'm gonna get into the psychosis thing in the next video, because we already have like 50 minutes on this video just alone. So I'm gonna stop it here, and thank you guys so much for if you got this far in the video, 50 minutes. Thank you so much. Have a good day.